Lawan ni.
Don't be photos, no?
Oh, someone took photos, huh? Yeah. He'll take.
This is all? Good afternoon, everyone. I am Ali Raza Rizvi. I am Global Director for Climate Change and Energy Transition at IUCN, International Union for Conservation of Nature. For this press conference, we will be having our panelists, representing family farmers, and Easter Pannonia, Secretary General, Asian Farmer Association, Stephen Mochari, CEO, East Africa Farmer Federation, Thomas Patriota, Head of International Affairs, Ministry of Development and Family Farming, Brazil. Here, representing IUCN's long-standing partnership with family farmers and their organizations through initiatives such as the Forest and Farm Facility and support the Family Farmers for Climate Action Alliance and Alliance of Regional Global Farmers network representing 95 million smallholders across Asia, Africa, Latin America, and Pacific, who are represented by Easter and Stephen on the panel today. Across regions, FFF has worked directly with farmers and producer organizations to strengthen climate resilience, promote sustainable and nature-positive agriculture practices, improve livelihoods, and amplify the voices of smallholders and climate farmers for policy and finance processes. The experiences gained over the past decade has reinforced the importance of channeling support directly through the farmer organizations, enabling them to lead solutions that respond to local priorities and challenges. Today's discussion reflects the importance of ensuring that knowledge, experience, and leadership of family farmers remain at the center of efforts to build more resilient food systems and secure more equitable access to finance. So now I will request Easter Pannonia, Secretary General, Asia Farmer Association, which represents 22 national farmers organizations and 13 million family farmers, to say a few words. So over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon to everyone. In South and Southeast Asia, the months of May to December are very crucial because this is the rainy season, and rain signal a new cropping season for both irrigated and rain-fed lands. But El Niño can weaken our hopes and postpone our dreams. Across South and Southeast Asia, El Niño will cause irrigation and natural water sources to dry out, increase wild forest fires, bleach coral reefs, and kill planktons that are food for marine animals, bring increased pests and diseases, but also in between, bring stronger typhoons that have strong winds and rains, causing massive flooding in streets and farms. The Southeast Asia region could see a 2 to 8% reduction in rice, our staple crop, compared with a normal year, with larger local losses in drought-prone areas. And what does this mean? Small-scale farmers produce 80% of the food in the region, and El Niño will reduce yields, harvest, and incomes, threatening food security and reducing the well-being of smallholders. El Niño is also happening during the Israel-US war with Iran. Because of drought, small-scale farmers are forced to heavily rely on diesel-powered tractors and water pumping machines. And diesel prices have increased from 9% in India to 30% in Cambodia and 50% in my country, the Philippines, in 3 months since the war started. In India, rents for the use of tractors have gone up by 50%. Some tractor owners have even passed the responsibility of paying the diesel to the farmers because of erratic prices. Fertilizer prices have gone up as well by as much as 37% with some shortages, for example, in India. Seed prices have also gone up due to seed shortage as a result of the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. Women farmers such as Rashida Ben has reported a doubling of harvesting costs. Bunava Ben in India about the rising cost of edible oil and sugar, making it difficult for women to manage household expenses. The agencies of farmers, farmers organizations, and cooperatives, or FOs, provide services to members to cope up with this fuel fertilizer cum El Niño crisis. FOs promote agroecological regenerative approaches and improve availability of local climate resilient seeds, amongst others. Okay. For example, our project with FFF, with 20,000 USD, has helped 405 young farmer agri-enterprises. But these are not enough. FOs of smallholders get only 0.36% of the funding we need to adopt and only a fifth of international public climate finance spending on food and agriculture. This has to change. That is why in Family Farmers for Climate Action, which is an alliance of 11 farmers organizations with 95 million members, we have ambition to have more and better finance at national and global levels, including to have a dedicated fund for empowering farmers organizations to scale up our work on climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. So you see that farmers are facing double whammy of a super El Nino and a global fertilizer crisis. So with potentially significant, consequences for food production and food prices. And, last week, scientists confirmed a very strong El Nino report, which says a top of substantial existing global warming could bring unprecedented heat. The National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration warned that it could equal or exceed the 1997-98 El Nino, which resulted in widespread droughts, flooding, tornadoes, and wildfire, helping to trigger severe food shortages, price hikes, and dramatic rise in hunger and food insecurity. And together with all this is going on, this year the closure of Strait of Hormuz and the surge in energy prices quickly translated into fertilizer prices spikes and supply manufacturing and natural gas, and 30% of world fertilizer, comes through the strait. So even if US-Iran peace deal holds and the strait reopens, it is unlikely that fuel and fertilizer prices and supplies will return to pre-crisis level anytime soon, putting crop yield for later half of 26-27 at risk. So now let's see what's happening in Africa. So for that, over to you, Stephen.
Yes, thank you, moderator. So the El Nino crisis that is going to be experienced by farmers sometime in August is just a culmination of a series of other events that have actually happened for the last couple of years. For the first time, Africa has been experiencing cyclones, something that has never happened in many years. And the drought events have become ever so frequent. The continent had put together an African agriculture policy called CADIP that has been in existence for over 25 years. Unfortunately, our countries have not met their commitments to this policy of allocating at least 10% of their budgets to agriculture, and they've only put in about 2 to 3%. So in essence, over the years, it means that the level of investments in agriculture by the public institutions and even private institutions has been on a decline, creating a lot of vulnerability within the farm organizations. So now with the challenge of fertilizer, again, the continent had tried to address issues of fertilizer. In 2006, we had what we call the Abuja Declaration, which looked at the possibilities of increasing use of fertilizer per hectare from less than 10 kilos to about 50 kilos. Of course, this has not been met still by the continent because, again, of cost of use of fertilizer and other, contingent cost in production. So a handful of countries have been able to achieve this. So what are we saying? What you're saying is that the the challenge we face in the continent is that due to all these issues I've talked about, the continent is now importing food. I think as of the last statistics from UNCTAD and the African Development Bank, we are looking at over $100 billion worth of food imports into the continent. What this actually means is that if we're not able to check and mitigate the challenges of climate change, if we're not able to adapt quickly, you're not able to put in resources directly to the farmers because they're the ones who are feeding the continent, feeding the world. Agriculture is contributing so much when it comes to over 60% of employment is from agriculture. Growth of agriculture is also impacting positively to other sectors, meaning a decline in agriculture as is happening is already causing inflation. And these import bills are putting a lot of stress in public resources. I think most of half of the countries in Africa are now undergoing debt distress. So you can see it's a phenomenal challenge. So what you're actually saying is that we need to reduce the conversations. We need to look at these resources that are being set aside. Can the promises around these resources be met by the institutions that have actually made those promises? Can we also look at the mechanisms around access to the funds to ensure that we're reducing bureaucracy? We're building pipelines that are able to ensure that farm organizations access these resources easily. I think over the many years, ourselves and Nesta and other farm organizations have managed resources, huge resources from the EU, from many partners. And I think we have the capacity to be able to manage resources directly. So we are putting together this advocacy, saying, now is important that we listen to farmers. These conversations have always left out farmers because they've been mainly skewed towards environmentalists. And we are happy there has been a program since Sharm el-Sheikh, but we still don't have proper resources set aside for adaptation. And I think it's important that, based on the issues I've actually raised, that we put this conversation in the middle of the conversations going today and to the COP meeting in Turkey.
Thank you, Stephen. It's so critical that direct financing, because somehow the people who are responsible for more than half of the food, sustenance, they are not part of the discussions and decision making. Now, going to Brazil, who has pushed, action agenda into COP processes that we need to go beyond negotiations and going into action. And Thomas, you're just coming back from BRICS meeting. So what are your views in Brazilian government in this connection?
Thank you very much. For Brazil's Ministry of Agrarian Development and Family Farming, which focuses on smallholders, small and medium-scale agriculture in Brazil and indeed in its international actions, COP30 was a unique occasion to launch a plan to accelerate solutions, which is called Terra, which in Portuguese means soil, land, and planet. And it stands also in its acronym in English for Together Expanding Resilient and Restorative Agroecology and Agroforestry. Agroecology, as has already been mentioned here by our colleague Esther from the Asian Farmers Association, is perhaps one of the most comprehensive solutions that are available, not just for adaptation to climate shocks. Indeed, agroecological production systems are more resilient, whether it's to droughts, because and agroforestry systems tend to have more water retention capacity, and therefore they become more resistant to droughts or to fires, but also have more deep-rooted systems, which make them more resistant, for example, to cyclones and hurricanes. But not only are they more adapted, but they also mitigate more than conventional agriculture, because they are the soils that are more rich in micronutrients. Actually, soils after oceans are the largest carbon sink in the world. And even though this is not very often mentioned in the UNFCCC, so we can work with the family farmers, the small and medium-scale farmers, who represent close to 40% of humanity, are responsible for close to 80% of the food that is consumed in value terms worldwide, and yet they receive less than 1% of climate finance. So we need to reverse this, and this is what Terra, our plan to accelerate solutions, aims to do, and it aims to not reinvent the wheel. It aims to take advantage of funds that already exist, including the Forest and Farm Facility, of which IUCN is a member, along with the FAO, the IIED, the Institute for Environment and Development, as well as AgriCorps, the coalition of cooperatives. And Terra is working with that fund, which channels close to 60% of its resources directly to cooperatives and associations, so to strengthen the farmers' organizations themselves, along with the International Fund for Agricultural Development, which has another multi-donor trust fund working on adaptation for smallholders, and now Partners Foundation, which is a philanthropic organization. So with these three organizations, we aim to be able to channel different sources of funding, public, private, national, multilateral, from different sources, so that we can reach that scale. And we know it's possible. There are examples. I just came back from India, from the BRICS meeting. Actually, we took 20 farmers last year to the state of Andhra Pradesh in the south of India, where that local government was able to scale from 40,000 to 1.2 million farmers in agroecological production systems over the course of 10 years by training 10,000 farmer coaches who become extensionists, who train other farmers in agroecological practices, by creating biofactories where they manufacture their own bioinputs with the local ingredients available, by working with women's self-help groups, and so on. So by combining different sources of policies, Terra aims through 5 acceleration levers who work with strengthening farmers' organizations, creating different types of knowledge and skills and practices hubs on agroecology and agroforestry, bringing different sources of finance, whether it's short-term catalytic funds or more longer-term transition capital from development banks, for instance, making available bioinputs, adapted machinery and equipment to small-scale agriculture and agroforestry, and encouraging vital addition and access to markets, such as through national school feeding programs, which Brazil has pioneered. We have a program that reserves at least 30% of the food that is consumed by primary and secondary school students should be purchased by law to family farmers, and that guarantees a market for the family farmers, which allows them to make investment decisions, including on transitioning towards agroecological and more sustainable agroforestry practices. So agroecology and agroforestry is really a crucial part of the solution. It not only makes agriculture more resilient to climate shocks, and including the ones that are coming up soon, unfortunately, and will be increasingly more hard and more frequent, but it also mitigates more greenhouse gases, along with restoring biodiversity, soil regeneration and water retention, and food security and nutrition, along with income generation. So if donors would need to, in a way, use scarce resources to have more impact, they have a great incentive to invest in agroecology and agroforestry, because by investing in that, you can have all these multiple positive ripple effects.
Thank you, Thomas. Now we have few minutes for question and answer. And please note that other representatives of FFCA are also available to speak to you after the event. Mr. Lavari, President of the Network of Farmer and Producers Organization in West Africa, so French speaking. So after the event, will be here who can speak also with you. So any question if you have? Yes, please.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you very much. This is Juan from Plant-Based Treaty. I'm wondering, because it's very important to destinate funding to support adaptation, particularly agroforestry systems, as you said. But I was wondering if you also actively promote the transition towards more climate-resilient crops, particularly from livestock holders, as livestock will be highly affected, particularly small scale, more than 800 million in Africa and more than 3 million in Brazil. So beyond like talking about the agroforest, is like livestock actually a central topic on the agenda? Thank you.
Thank you. Any other question? Then I'll go to panelists. Yes, please.
Thank you so much. My question is to the last speaker. Just relating what you've just shared and the good progress, especially promoting agroecology, and what we are seeing in the negotiations right now. And unfortunately, the countries from the BRICS are some of the strongest voices against agroecology and the food systems agenda. So how do we, really, how do you see that with what is happening at the national level, because in the negotiations we are getting pushback from those same countries. Yeah, and my name is Bridget Mugambe. I work with the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa.
Thank you. If no other question, I'll go to panelists. Yeah, maybe let's start with the last one, and then all three of you can respond to the first question. So Thomas, over to you.
Thank you. So I'll start with the last question from AFSA, no? The Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa. Thanks very much for that question. And indeed, interestingly, at the BRICS ministerial meeting, one of the things we managed to agree on was the creation of a network of centers on agroecology and regenerative agriculture. So India, I mentioned this example in what they call natural farming, but other terms are used. China uses green agriculture. In Brazil, we tend to use more the term agroecology. But indeed, as we have mentioned, contradictions exist, both between and even within countries, because I think what we are witnessing, if we zoom out also in terms of the time scale, we are beginning a transition, and this is a consensus in the scientific world, even though it's not always mentioned in the policy world. We are in the midst of a transition from an agriculture that is predominantly based on chemical inputs to one that is predominantly based on biological inputs, which is good news. However, the bad news is that this transition is way too slow than what it should be to address all these interconnected challenges that I was mentioning, whether it's adaptation, mitigation, biodiversity, soil and water, as including also food security, nutrition, and income generation. And really, the goal of this plan to accelerate solutions that I've mentioned is to accelerate this transition. In a way, some draw the comparison with where we were about 20 or 30 years ago in the energy transition from fossil fuel to clean energy, where renewables seemed like something that was negligible, that would never reach scale. And yet, here we are with investments, frankly, much more considerable now when we look at renewable energy. So we really, I think, need to create these broad coalitions between all of the parties that have already understood the urgency of this transition and the fact that it's feasible also. I think, because I think many different parties tend to look at agroecology and say, well, this is very nice, but it's not scalable. But actually, we have evidence that it is scalable. If we have these different policies, and that's why we work with these 5 acceleration levers. They often happen in isolation. Many countries may have policies for credit or rural extension or access to markets, but they're rarely coordinated well together. And one of the objectives of this plan is to precisely enable this coordination, and at the heart of this coordination capacity are the farmers' organizations, the cooperatives, the associations, the federation of cooperatives also at national level, which can allow to this scale to happen. So cooperatives, for example, can host training centers where farmers can learn with researchers on agroecological practices. They can host biofactories where the bioinputs can be manufactured and distributed to the members of the cooperatives. They can host also the machineries which will be shared between the members. They can enable the access to credit much easier than individual families, and the access to markets and value addition. So what we really need is, again, to strengthen these farmers' organizations, these economic farmers' organizations, and that's why it's so crucial to work with the farmers' organizations and their networks at the regional level. And it's great to be here with both the Asian Farmers Association and the Eastern African Farmers Federation, because this is with whom the people that we need to work with. Thanks.
Thank you, Thomas. Yes.
Yeah, so quick one
very
on
briefly,
yeah, on livestock. So one of the challenges we have in Africa, in East Africa especially, is our soils are very high in acidity and very low in organic carbon. And some of the practices that we are actually promoting with our farmers is around cyclic agriculture, where you're actually combining both crop and livestock enterprises. That's one of the approaches. We are also promoting, use of compost, agroforestry, and things like that. When it comes to especially the livestock value chains, we find that we have 2 kinds of systems. We have the intensive systems, and through the intensive systems, we are also getting, looking at products that are able to reduce methane Emissions, in as much as the population in Africa for livestock is still very low to cause any significant emissions, but also we have extensive systems. And on extensive systems, these are pastoral systems. And what we've done is that we have policies that are supporting transhumance and allowing movement of livestock, hence assisting a lot in terms of landscape management. So what we are seeing is that there are policies supporting agroecology and supporting this kind of systems. Of course, a lot of that needs to come from the public sector so that it actually informs how private actually comes on board. But I think for me, what we're looking at in Africa is that how both systems are integrated, are part of our programs, because at the end of the day, we need to achieve sustainable production.
Thank you. In 1 minute, please.
In 1 minute. My friend said 2 minutes. So basically, we need to shift to a resilient, adaptive with mitigation co-benefits in agriculture. And the way we see it, it's only through regenerative, natural farming, climate resilient, agroecological, agroforestry approaches in our farms, fisheries, and forests. And farmers' organizations are key agents in expanding this, in accelerating this. We have examples to show by the many projects that we have managed with donors like EU and IFAD. But this is not enough. We see that there is big climate finance out there in GCF, for example, with other donor governments that we need to access. We have to be seen, farmers' organizations have to be seen as agents of change for a just, resilient agriculture and invest in the work that we do. Trust us to manage the money. And we will, and with in equal partnership, we will expand and accelerate agroecology and regenerative agriculture in our lifetime. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Thomas. So after this, you can, please, outside, we can do it. The new other is conference, we can just, yeah. We can ask other outside, yeah. Thank you.